Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're all doing well, and today, my friends, we're back with a showdown here between the Chaos Dwarves and Nurgle. So it's going to be Drazhoath the Ashen facing off against the Exalted Great Unclean One, so not going to be Kugath here today. And this is round 2 of this matchup, so of course you saw this about a week ago here on the channel, but I've had some time to scheme since then. So let's break down the build and see what the Chaos Dwarves can do. As far as the infantry goes, it's going to be Chaos Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. I figured there might be some Nurgle Warrior action, maybe a little bit of armor. Granted, in retrospect, this is probably a mistake because intuitively speaking, if you're playing against Chaos Dwarves, you're going to be fearing Magma Cannons. Therefore, your infantry quality is going to be a little bit weaker, but even still, you could probably just switch these to the shielded variant and you'd be totally fine. But it is going to be Chaos Warrior great weapons, 2 of them. And in the middle, we have the Blazing Beards of Basharak. These guys are amazing. They're one of the cheapest ways to get blasting charges on the Chaos Dwarves, which is very expensive. They cost, I believe, 950 give or take. But if you want to pay for an Infernal Ironsworn, they cost 1300. So these guys are a little bit of a safer pick against a faction like Nurgle, I think, which can bring in a Mortis Engine, it can bring in Soul Grinders, it has a lot of good infantry killing power, so I prefer these guys to the Infernal Ironsworn. Now, frontline. Hobgoblins. No, Goblin Laborers. It's going to be 2 of those bad boys getting the Malign Authority, so they're near the Chaos Dwarves, therefore they will be getting a little bit of a leadership buff. In the back we have Hobgoblin Archers, and I didn't want to go too crazy on this. Nurgle is very good at bombarding archers, so the Hobgoblin Archers are there just to basically apply fire damage to any number of big targets in the front line. Now, I may have judged you a little bit too harshly. It makes me think of the Thanos quote, but we do have the Deathstreak rocket launcher. Now, when it first came out, I was really kind of down on this thing. I felt like it was a little bit haggard, but since then, I've kind of come around a little bit in a few matchups. So if you're playing against, like, let's say, any sort of a wagon type unit, a single entity like Kugath, like Mazdamundi, an Ancient Salamander, a Soul Grinder, more specifically, and that's the reason why I brought it in this matchup, it can actually do pretty well. It's anti-large rocket. If you can find a target to sit it on the entire game, it's really not the end of the world, and it can perform well. And its anti-infantry isn't bad against slow-moving infantry. So here's the Deathstreak, and I hope you guys get to see how it can work here at this game. Obviously, one Magma Cannon. Magma Cannon's going to be there to torch infantry. We have El Gordo here on the side, as I like to call him. Gordo's the backstabber. And I just bring him with his Lucky Dice and Lucky Git, which is a healing ability. So you just park him on the side objective. He's really, really tough to kill. He's kind of like a Walmart version of Sigvald. Now, for Big Daddy, we got Drazhoath the Ashen up in the sky. I think he's great against Nurgle. He is a fire-causing monster, insanely good stats. As far as the lore of magic goes, we just have the Hellhammer to clear out Nurgle infantry, and the Flaming Breath, which actually does very well against single entities and things like that. So yeah, there's Drazhoath the Ashen Man. I think I have one item as well. Yeah, we do have the Hell Shard Amulet. So when he's in melee contact, he can get 10% ward save and damage reflection, which isn't bad. So that's my build. Now for the great flying talk over here, he's going to be coming in with Marauders of Nurgle, so he's got a whole battle line of great weapons, which is a good choice. A Soul Grinder, one of the techs that I've kind of stumbled across and we played around with in some of the early games was the double Soul Grinder being very good against Chaos Dwarves since they kind of lack a traditional cannon, but since then the Deathstreak has proven to be pretty good against it. And yeah, we got the Exalted Great Unclean One, who's just a mobile Mortis Engine, a little bit more dynamic than Kugath. I still think Kugath is slightly better, but he's also very viable and more maneuverable. So Drazhoath the Ashen going to be jumping in and going after the Nurgle boys, and he gets a little work in there, but obviously going to be retreating. Great Unclean Ones are some of the scarier fighters in the entire game, so we don't want any of that business. Magma Cannon still teeing off and doing okay damage against some Marauders. So 2 units of Marauders have been pounded, and the Deathstreak rocket is continuing to hit home to an extent. Right as I say that, it has to miss. But the first rocket did hit, and it actually did some good damage against this, and I wonder if he was hiding here. If he was, that's like a super MLG play, but the Soul Grinder is going to be hiding behind this pillar, bombarding into my Blazing Beards of Basharak, but they should be able to get their blasting charges, and I threw the blasting charges at the Exalted Great Unclean One, and it actually didn't do bad damage. Drazhoath going to be coming in here, dropping some sweet ash in just a moment as the Magma Cannons continue to tee off. You have to be careful about Magma Cannons, though. They do a lot of friendly fire damage, so if you shoot into the back of your own infantry, it can be quite nasty. Breath Attack coming in from Drazhoath. He'll be jumping in to rear charge this Great Unclean One. I saw Plague Toads being summoned in. Plague Toads are super meta, super strong right now. As far as the early game, I hesitate to call it a meta, but as far as the games that have been played in this like early circuit, the old Plague Toads are very, very common, and the fact they have armor piercing makes them very dynamic. So here comes Bull Centaur Renders. I think they're very good in the Nurgle matchup. Good against infantry, generally speaking. Good mass, and they can get through on top of the Plague Toads and hopefully drop some nice anti-large attacks. So we'll see what the Bull Centaur Renders can do, and they do have the great weapons, and they're also preventing the Chaos Dwarf Warriors here from getting run over by Toads. So the battle rages on, looking at the value. Of course, you always pull ahead on Nurgle, especially with like a shooting-based army. Drazhoath the Ashen, able to get a terror out on these Marauders and continue to provide some nice fire damage against the Exalted Great Unclean One, but going to be retreating back right now, getting ready to do a little bit of cycle charging, replenishing that charge bonus, while the Hobgoblin Archers in the back do put some nice damage into the old Great Unclean One. So look at this! I definitely judged you too harshly. The Death Shriek giving me great utility here. Now, even if he hadn't brought a Soul Grinder, it's still like a less good version of a Magma Cannon, but it can do okay damage against infantry. So the utility of that is very nice. Like, yeah, there's some matchups, I think, like, if they still have cannons, like Dwarves, Empire, like, it'll suck pretty bad because the cannon will outtrade it pretty heavily, but in matchups like this, I do think the Death Shriek can be a nice tool against, like, single entities while still having some anti-infantry clearing capabilities. So Drazhoath the Ashen clearing out the front line while the Blazing Beards of Basharik stand firm here in the middle. They do have a couple hand grenades left, but this is where Nurgle starts to get a little bit scary. You know, they continue to heal, and if I can't finish off the Great Unclean One, he's able to heal up. It will mitigate a lot of my value lead, but direct hit from the Magma Cannon there on the Barons of the Bog, and I do also get some Hobgoblin Wolf Riders. That's one of the good ways to drag down like the elite Barons, is just kind of throw crappy units at them and poke them away here. Over in the middle, Drazhoath the Ashen doing nice work, but I gotta be careful to make sure he doesn't get surrounded. If the Exalted Great Unclean One and some Toads are able to pin him in place, yes, he's a good fighter with a big HP pool, but Great Unclean Ones with poison and just their hard-hitting stats, certainly you don't want to be messing around with those bad boys. So as far as my frontliners go, we have some Goblin Laborers here. We do have Chaos Dwarf Warriors, which are not immune to Psychology. They're not like Dwarven Longbeards, even though they cost about the same amount. Bull Centaur Render still providing some decent anti-large attacks, looking at the value so far. They've gotten about 900 value, but now that the Great Unclean One's here, it's going to be a little bit scary. Drazhoath tries to get back up in the sky for a breath attack and does do some work. Over on the side, the Soul Grinder of Nurgle just holding this down. I got some Goblin Laborers heading over here, as well as some Hobgoblin Sneaky Gits who are going to come and try and steal the point. The Death Shriek rocket, in the meantime, I think still blasting away on the Soul Grinder. It's gotten 1200 value. The rocket itself does cost 1350, so it's pretty darn close to paying for itself. And now I start to get pressured in the backfield. So this is where it started to get a little bit scary. Even if you're up, you know, by 3,000-4,000 value against Nurgle, between the Fleshy Abundance and some of the different healing abilities, they can really, you might think you're ahead, but you're really like pretty close to them. And there's a ton of healing. So the rocket comes down, does pound one of the Toads, but the Toads are able to jump on top of the old archers. So these Hobgoblin archers going to be having a pretty bad time. I didn't have too much in reinforcements to actually stop them. I think the best tool I had was a Bull Centaur Render, which I didn't have quite enough. If you're looking at my funds right now, I think I just summoned them out. Yeah, so we finally get the Bull Centaurs to come out. Should be able to clear him off. And this was something, guys, that really caught me off guard. He had a random ass unit of Chosen working around the side of the map, and now they're going to be in my backfield. I didn't notice they were Chosen, so I didn't shoot them with the Magma Cannons. I literally checked like 3 or 4 of his units and was like, oh, these are Marauders. So I didn't check the last units, and then they came in here with the dreaded Chosen of Nurgle. So the Chosen of Nurgle going to be a big problem, and I do switch my firepower onto them when I notice. And yeah, it's going to be getting pretty crazy. Now on the side point, it is owned by myself, but the Marauder Horseman should be able to take those in just a moment. Here in the middle, El Gordo is trying to fight to the best of his ability. He does pop the Crooked Dice, which is going to be giving him 40% ward save, making him very tough to kill. Chaos Dwarf Warrior sitting in the middle of the map, and the Hobgoblin Sneaky Gits and Goblin Laborers are able to grab the high ground point. And the response of Nurgle is going to be sending out Toads, which is good. Plague Toads of Nurgle would easily kill both these units and basically barely take any damage in the process. A good counter to Plague Toads of Nurgle would be Hobgoblin Wolf Riders, which can take advantage of the fact that they only have 24 melee defense and light armor, right? So we'll see how that all unfolds. Drazhoath the Ashen trying to scrap at the backfield. And, you know, in the beginning of the game, I really felt as if I had a massive advantage, but it started to feel like it was getting diminished a little bit. I saw him creeping back in value now, and with healing being taken into account, and the fact that his Great Unclean One is very much functional, beating down El Gordo over here, you know, we're having a little bit of trouble. So Drazhoath finally able to get the Barons of the Bog to a pretty low amount of health, but they're super elite, so not easy to break them. And the Hobgoblin Archers not going to be able to defend the artillery. And, you know, I have a lot of value on the battlefield, but much of it is tied up in my artillery pieces. So if my artillery is having to run away instead of shooting, that is going to be a great opportunity for Nurgle to get back in the game. Now, on the backside of the map, the Wolf Riders are able to catch the Soul Grinder. Now, the Soul Grinder was on death's bed. It had like 800 HP from being shot by the Death Shriek rocket. And the Hobgoblin Riders, the man, they were able to get back there and take that beast down. So that was a pretty big win for us. Meanwhile, on the high ground, we do see the Hobgoblin Sneaky Gits trying to fight the Toads, but having a pretty bad time. And my Bull Centaur Renders trying to fight off Chosen of Nurgle. But it's easy to forget how alpha Chosen are. These guys are just monsters. And they get a Fleshy Abundance too. And their stats are just that good. 45-52 with Poison. The Bull Centaur Renders going to be getting tanked in terms of stats. And they're, again, the Great Weapon variant, which will have good armor piercing. But they're not going to be designed against infantry pieces, and you can really start to feel that. So, feeling the pressure in the backfield, I do summon out some Chaos Dwarf Blunderbusses. They do immediately get compromised by some Toads, but not before they're able to put some hurting stopping power and buy some time for my Death Shriek rocket launcher to get back here. Drazhoath the Ashen going to be drifting over and going after Ye Old Exalted Great Unclean One, and he does get the charge. Fire damage going to be coming in, and we'll try and wear it down. You can see immediately get some good damage there, but Drazhoath, once he gets poisoned by the Great Unclean One, start to take some hits, that's when that fight can change. But if he does try and heal himself right now, he is technically on fire, so it will be a little bit of a penalty. And El Gordo, man, I'm telling you, he is no joke. El Gordo getting on the point, and he's just able to grab this, and he's so persistent and so difficult to remove. Yeah, like obviously there was an opportunity earlier, maybe to summon in some hounds to chase him off when he was routing, but he does some nice work. So the Hammer of Justice coming down, going to be smashing some of these Marauders, but they are able to partially get out of the way, but even still, the Hammer of Justice does some work. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we summon in the Bale Taurus. So the Bale Taurus is the 1800 gold variant. I prefer it over the cheaper variant simply because it has way more melee defense, and I find it to be an absolute pain to get rid of. But the Bale Taurus should answer most of these Nurgle units. It's going to be extremely efficient against the Toads, extremely efficient against the Marauders with terror routes and whatnot. And you can see the Plague Toads of Nurgle immediately crumble under the duress here of this giant beast. So, ye old Chaos Dwarf Blunderbuss is going to be setting up, and this is certainly one of my better answers against Nurgle. Fire, reload, fire! They don't need to pump those Dwarven legs, but they do need to put some hurt into the infantry charging. So if I can take out these Chosen of Nurgle, that's going to feel pretty good. Some Nurgle cavalry are going to be on their way in, but they do not stand alone. The Bale Taurus, again, will probably get a terror out on these Marauders pretty quickly, and will also be an ample answer here against the Chosen. Now, as far as the objectives go, we've been able to control them okay. We see some Plague Toads, the ones from earlier. They've obviously had a very dominant fight, clearing a lot of my chaff units, but we do have some remnants of the Bull Centaur Renders heading over there. Bull Centaur Renders with their anti-large. Most likely will be quite functional against the Plague Toads, as we do summon in some Hobgoblin Cutthroats to try and just attrition that point down. Now, in the center, it is going to be some Marauders of Nurgle versus my Chaos Dwarf Warriors, who would lose that fight pretty decisively against a full health Marauder, but I do have some Hobgoblins there. And El Gordo on the side, not quite able to flip that point, but one of the better ways to counter Plague Toads, let's say you're playing High Elves, Illyrian Reavers, super good answer, and or Missiles. If you're playing, the Empire, you can do some Empire Knights. Although Plague Toads will probably trade better into Shock Cavalry now that have armor, and are a little bit more expensive in terms of a cost perspective because of their armor piercing. So light cavalry, like Blade Riders, Hobgoblin Wolf Riders, these are all things that you typically want to use to counter like Plague Toad types units. Now, really, really aggressive diving back here. Drazhoath, the Ashen, able to get away. Now, the newly buffed Rotflies are in. Rotflies used to only have 9 models, but now they have 12. So I would say that Rotflies are considerably better, and I'm really excited to start getting some tournaments going and see how Nurgle does in these tournaments, because honestly, I feel like they've really improved quite a bit. I mean, these Rotflies got 1,000 value. They've only been out for a minute, and they were fighting some very, very hard fights, so certainly impressed. They almost killed Drazhoath the Ashen. So, artillery's back online. Magma Cannon trying to shoot into the Exalted Great and Clean One. He's at 1,800 HP. Death Freak Rocket Launcher. I certainly think we judged him too harshly. Looking at this bad boy. 2,000 value. Again, it had a Soul Grinder, it had a Great Unclean One to shoot at, but it also did shoot at infantry during several points of the game. Over here on the far side objective, El Gordo and the Hobgoblins able to grab that one, and we do have the Marauders moving into the backfield. And some Forsaken have moved up. So Hobgoblin Cutthroats able to just attrition down the Plague Toads. The Plague Toads were worn down by those Bull Centaurs that did come over here. So the Hobgoblins might be able to finish the job. Granted, they're sitting at a decent amount of leadership. And Forsaken are basically going to hard counter these guys. Hobgoblins, they don't really have any armor piercing. I mean, they have a little bit. But typically, any sort of like shock infantry with high DPS is going to just cut them to pieces. And Hobgoblins also have terrible leadership. Their base leadership is 40. So if they're not near Chaos Dwarf units, they really, really fold super quick. Drazhoath's going to be coming up here. We do have Goblin Laborers as well as some Infernal Ironsworn. So just kind of playing the long game. I knew I had a pretty substantial points lead, but Nurgle is pretty close to me on value, guys. Might even be ahead considering their healing. So we see 12 flat against 11.2. So Nurgle actually has pulled ahead of me on value, 100%. The amount of healing they've done this game is no joke. So I do have the objective lead and the mobility advantage, and I was able to push Nurgle out of the backfield a little bit. The Bale Taurus is going to be coming over here, most likely to just rout off these Marauders in tandem with the Hoblin Wolf Riders. Hoblins! And Gorda's Backstabber. So they're moving in. The Bale Taurus has some great animations. I love it. They just look like they're just happy little bulls bouncing around, and yeah, they're great. Really good monsters. Physical resist, the longer they're in combat, what's not to love? So the Terror Route's going to be coming in a moment. Those Nurgle units not going to be having a good time. We do have a Cultist of Nurgle and some Horsemen coming in, but the Bale Taurus should be able to take it like a champ. Granted, throwing axes are a very, very good answer against these type of monsters. So moving up into the middle with the Blazing Beards of Basharik, as well as some shotguns, and we do have our Magma Cannon, which was able to shoot most of its payload, getting 1900 value, no surprise, against good quality infantry, and the Infernal Ironsworn. Armor-piercing blasting charges, guys, what's not to love? These things are really, really good against infantry units, so the Goblin Labor is going to be pushing up on the point, and why is the capture weight in my favor? Goblin Laborers should have expendable. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Although, yeah, the Forsaken are a little bit damaged, so maybe that's why. Hard to say. Strange stuff. Hobgoblin Cutthroats and Infernal Ironsworn going to be moving up. The Forsaken do turn around to wreck my poor goblins, and immediately I turn and run, trying to bait them into the Infernal Ironsworn. And the Infernal Ironsworn at the point will give me the capture weight advantage, whereas Drazhoath managed to survive, which is pretty big. If he had broken, it would have been off the battlefield. It would have been a big leadership debuff for me. So the fact that he's able to cackle in the tree line is quite good. Now Nurgle's going to be rotating over to the side point, and yeah, the Great Unclean One is still very much alive. 3,000 HP. He's going to be able to swing the tide of many of these battles. The Bale Taurus and El Gordo trying to shank down the Cultists, but Cultists of Nurgle are serious. They are very, very tough to kill. They are weak to fire, though, so the Bale Taurus and many of those monsters should be pretty good. El Gordo getting a nice attack in the back there. Up on the high ground, the objective has been flipped, and the Infernal Ironsworn going to be throwing their hand grenades here in a second. If I'm not mistaken, I might have forgotten to give the order, but the Plague Toads are on their way in. But even still, the Infernal Ironsworn should be able to hold. Grenades come out, and unfortunately, I did get interrupted, so I was a little bit late on that. But yeah, Plague Toads and Forsaken, not a terrible combo here. The Forsaken will get wrecked, but a couple grenades do go down, and I get Hobgoblin Riders to move in, and they're going to be able to do some work against the Toads, while the Infernal Ironsworn and their super, super high melee defense at 64. I mean, they're just Ironbreakers with a little bit different stat profiles. Are able to hold. So overall, we should be in good shape on this objective. In the middle, we'd have the Blazing Beards of Basharik, as well as the Chaos Dwarf Blunderbusses, and Nurgle is able to win this objective on the side. Nothing I can do about it. And Gorda's getting surrounded by chaff units, and they probably will drag him down, and that's one of the better ways to deal with him, is surrounding him with chaff units. Bale Taurus looking for some picks, maybe going to be doing a breath attack. I can't quite remember what was going down here, but yeah, there comes breath. And 3,000 HP right on his head puts him down to about, so about a 300 damage right there. If it had been more of a direct hit, probably would have done 400 or 500 damage. So not terrible. I find that the Bale Taurus breath attacks are a little bit better against single entities and aren't quite as good against like infantry blobs and things like that. So Plague Toad swarming out to the middle, values within 700, and Nurgle is kind of on their way to getting several of these points back. Like, not inevitably, but, after time, he probably would be able to grind this objective back, although I do have the Bull Centaur Renders coming in, and Drazhoath is also going to maybe move up here. We do move back the Infernal Ironsworn. I was trying to reposition them to get the grenade volley off, but the Toads are able to push through and stay on top of them. But here comes the Bull Centaurs, baby. The Bull Centaurs going to be super good against Toads, and yeah, should be resilient against some of the Nurgle chaff units as well. Drazhoath just kind of chilling around the middle, casting what he can and trying to, give some leadership discouraging effects to the opponent. We do see the Nurgle Cultist. He is below 80% HP, which means he has a Plague Bearer summon, so the Infernal Ironsworn going to be trying to valiantly hold here in the middle. But overall, Nurgle is starting to take over the game again, but I think it's too late for them. But it's kind of cool. In the couple of games I played, the buffs to Nurgle seem good. They don't seem like they're overtuned at all. But Nurgle has been one of the factions that I found to be actually pretty good against Chaos Dwarves, like pretty even. I would honestly say it's an even matchup in my experience. Like both sides have some really nice tools against one another. And overall, Nurgle seems to be in a much better place, but doesn't seem overpowered by any stretch of the imagination. I'm very happy with the changes that we got with Nurgle. I think they're quite good. So the high ground is secured, which pretty much seals the fate. If they had been able to maybe rip all three objectives here and rip the high ground during that, maybe, but the Bull Centaur Renders and the Infernal Ironsworn able to hold, and that is going to be a victory for Drazhoath the Ashen. So certainly a very fun game, man. I am having so much fun with the Chaos Dwarves. They have such a dynamic roster, and I think that's really the fun of them. Whereas like with, when you play the Dwarves, typically you can't really like utilize their elite units super effectively in my experience, but you can use elite a little bit more with Chaos Dwarves because you have magic to support them and you also have mobility to support elite units. Whereas with Dwarves, when you send elite units places, they tend to be a little bit vulnerable due to your lack of mobility and magic that can like supplement them. So not that Chaos Dwarves have, any buffing spells that are good, but you get the picture. So, Death Shriek, guys, I honestly don't hate it in certain situations. I don't think it's a good artillery dueling weapon, but I think if you're looking to take down single entities, it is one of your better options at a range, right? You do have the Infernal Fireglaves, but they're super expensive, so one Pit of Shades can kill them, whereas this is going to be a little bit safer, and it's still not bad against infantry. Magma Cannon's amazing as usual. Some of the Chaos Dwarf infantry quite good. El Gordo did nice. Drazhoath paid for himself. He got about 2,600 value and was able to fight to the end game. And the Bull Centaur Renders, I highly recommend them against Nurgle. Nurgle can bring out a lot of Plague Toads, a lot of big threats, and having that dedicated anti-large sweeper is nice. The Bale Taurus, it was nice for securing my backfield via terror routes, but it still didn't have a chance to really pay for itself, so maybe there was better options. Maybe another Bull Centaur with dual weapons would have been better. Like, that's kind of what I was thinking. Maybe a Bull Centaur with the dual axes to just clear through Nurgle infantry in my backfield could have been the way, but hard to say. And the Blunderbuss has got 1,500 value, actually, which was pretty nice. For Nurgle, 2,700 on the big Exalted Boy. Very, very nice. That was a big thing. Shutting down the Soul Grinder was pretty brutal. I actually played a game with Anticity maybe 4 or 5 days ago where we had used double Soul Grinder to really counter Chaos Dwarves. And that was when we were both under the impression that the Deathshriek rockets were terrible. But now that I think Deathshriek is kind of in the table, or on the table, and we've kind of explored it a little bit, I think we're onto something. Who would have thought the Chosen would get 1800 value, though? The elite infantry, man. Really caught me off guard. Rotflies didn't seem bad either, man. Future's looking bright. GG, well played. We'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves. And HASHUT, bless this Ravage body. I think that'll be it. GG. See ya.